Hey, I want to talk to you a little bit about regret, and specifically if you regret making an offshore voluntary disclosure. For a lot of reasons, people get freaked out. Maybe that's something they read on IRS.gov, or maybe it was some tax professionals, but they go and they enter into the full offshore disclosure program. Then once the smoke settles, or maybe it's even a revenue agent at the IRS says, hey, why did you enter in this program? You don't need to. People look to say, okay, well, what can I do now? And unfortunately, even though the IRS could have rules that would allow you to withdraw and say enter into the Streamlined program, it doesn't quite work out that way. You basically have four options, as I see them, if you enter into the full OVDP and you want to get out. The first option is that you could basically just stay in the program and finish it, and you could pay that 27.5% penalty or a 50% penalty if you have one of the bad boy banks that's blacklisted. And if you are in that situation, we always advise really strongly looking at opting out, because usually you're always in a better situation there. And that's really your second option. I'll talk about that in a second. So your first option is just continuing, and the advantages of that is you know what the result's going to be. The disadvantages might not be a result you like, and it's also very time consuming. So our second option is to opt out, and this is something we find so many professionals are absolutely frightened of, because there's a risk. You might not know, you might not prevail, you might something bad could happen. But we haven't had one opt-out where our client hasn't ended up better. And I'd like to say it's because we're really awesome, but a lot of times we'll just do some work ahead of time and we'll apply the mitigation standards, and we'll see that even in a situation where the client will get willful penalties, they could be far, far better off than even that 27.5% penalty, and usually that 50% penalty. So the opt-out is a pretty good option, and a lot of times when someone's in the OVDP and doesn't want to be, that's usually what we look to do, because we can get a penalty that's a little bit better. So that's the advantage of it. The disadvantage is you don't know for sure, and also it could be time consuming. And if we do end up with an appeal on that FBAR penalty, that could add some additional time too. The third option is to do nothing and just hope the IRS forgets about you. Now the truth is, we've seen some cases sort of sit on the back burners for years and years and years. The IRS take no action. And we've seen some clients who got close to sort of escaping it, but the IRS seems to keep track and is aware of its penalty statutes. So what will happen is if you do nothing and you don't respond, whether through your fault or maybe you have a tax professional who, I don't know, is doing something, who knows, what the IRS will do is put you in something called a removal audit. A removal audit is you're audited under the same OVDP opt-out standard for your willful, non-willfulness determination. So it's kind of the same. The only difference is that there's no criminal protections that you have with the OVDP opt-out. Most people think if you opt out, you lose your criminal protections. That's not true. You still have them. And I mean, let me just say it this way. Most people vastly don't overestimate their criminal liability. They don't understand who IRS criminal investigations really want to go after. They want to go after people who they'll get a really good press release for, someone really famous, okay? Or someone who just doesn't have a great reputation. Whether it's true or not. If you're tied to something a little sensational, you have a little bit more of a risk. Or if you have previous convictions for, say, fraud, or if you're, a big time kind of drug dealer, you might have a problem. The person who really should get into the OVDP is the person who has a hard problem getting into the OVDP. Then it was the right program for you. But most people, they don't really need the criminal protection. What they need is some sort of protection from unlimited FBAR penalties. So that's why the removal audit, while it might seem very drastic and horrible, in fact, it's really not. It works in effect really not a big deal at all. Now, a fourth option some people do is they're in the OVDP and they file a Streamlined program anyway. It's like, hey, what's the harm? And I guess there is no harm. I haven't heard of any one of them ever being accepted. So to me, it's just you're kind of wasting time and wasting effort. So I would just strongly look at the other options, either continuing it with it or opting out. You know, the opting out is the better than a removal audit, a little bit so, not so much. So if you have any questions, you know, their facts really do matter a lot. So this is something where I can't give blanket advice. That's why we say give us a call, and we will help you figure out the best course of action.